Welcome back to Koala Moon. Tonight we have the best ever Bedtime Story Compilation, the perfect collection to help kids relax and fall asleep. These soothing bedtime stories are seamlessly mixed for sleep, so can be left playing with no risk of ads or wake-ups. Shall we begin? The early evening was Mum's favourite part of the day. It was a relaxing time when she could sit with her children and tell them a soothing bedtime story. As usual, her sons, Kieran and Finn, would take it in turns to request a story, and their mum would either read from one of their favourite books, or she would make up a new story. But that evening, as she sat on the comfy armchair between her sons' beds, she realised there was a problem. The family had been on holiday to France for 2 weeks, and they had filled their days with one energetic activity after the other. And when it had come to bedtime, her sons had climbed into bed and fallen asleep before they even had the chance to ask for a bedtime story. As a result, she had forgotten whose turn it was to choose a story. Kieran snuggled down in his bed and said he thought it was his turn to pick a story, and he would like the one about the gorilla who did magic tricks because it was the funniest story he knew. He chuckled at the thought of it and said it was the best bedtime story ever. His younger brother shook his head and said actually it was his turn to pick a story, and he wanted the one about the rainbow kitten who found some treasure inside a magical willow tree. Finn folded his little arms, gave his brother a long look, and said the kitten story was the best bedtime story ever. Kieran folded his arms as well, and said the gorilla story was the best bedtime story ever. Even better than the story about the astronaut who found a planet made of custard? Finn asked. I thought you liked that one best. Kieran smiled. Yeah, I do like that one. And I thought your favourite was the story about the dragon who loved dancing. Finn unfolded his little arms and giggled. He said he did like the dragon story very much. He wriggled about happily in his bed and asked Mum to tell them the dancing dragon story again. Even though Kieran loved the dragon story too, he told his mum it was definitely his turn to choose, and he wanted the astronaut story now instead of the gorilla one. Finn immediately disagreed and said it was his turn to choose. Mum knew her sons well, and by the looks on their faces, she knew they would be happy to discuss whose turn it was for the rest of the night. She smiled brightly at them and said, I've got an idea. Why don't we work together and make up a brand new story? It might be the very best bedtime story ever. What do you say? Kieran and Finn gave the matter some serious thought for all of 2 seconds. Then they nodded their heads and said they would like that. Good, Mum said with a hint of relief. Kieran, where would you like our story to be set? In outer space, he said without any hesitation. Finn pulled on his mum's sleeve and asked if it could be set in the ocean too, where all the mermaids live. He loved stories about mermaids. Mum nodded. I suppose we can have both places. What characters should we have in our story? Kieran gave his little brother a kind smile and said, The astronaut could be a dragon, and can we have a mermaid too? Mum smiled and said it was their story and they could have whatever they wanted in it. And anything at all could happen in the story. Her sons beamed at each other. The boys had a little chat with each other and decided the mermaid should be called Glittertail, and the dragon's name should be Bob. Can the dragon be purple, please? Finn asked. Mum, Glittertail really wants to play football. Can you make that happen in the story? Of course I can, Mum said confidently. I'm not sure how just yet, but I'll think of something. Now then, settle down in your beds, boys. Wriggle your fingers and toes and take some deep, relaxing breaths. The boys did as they were asked and snuggled down some more in their comfy beds. Mum said softly, I'll begin my story. It's called The Best Bedtime Story Ever. Once upon a time, there was a purple dragon called Bob. He loved doing all the usual things that dragons liked, such as flying over the mountains, dancing under the light of the moon, and playing hide and seek with his friends. But the thing Bob liked doing most of all was standing outside his home at night time and looking up at the stars and moon. There was something so magical about the night sky, and Bob's parents would often find him gazing at it with a faraway look in his eyes. Bob wanted to know how many stars there were in the sky. Did they have names? Did they make a sound when they twinkled? And what about the moon? How big was it? And was there another moon somewhere else in the sky? His parents tried to answer his questions, but they didn't know all of the answers, so they borrowed some books from the library to see if they would help. The books did help with some of Bob's questions, but not all of them. And as he continued to look up at the sky, night after night, Bob came up with more questions. How many planets were in the sky? Who lived on them? And what did they look like? What was beyond the furthest planet? Had any dragons ever flown into space? His parents only knew the answer to the last question, and said as far as they knew, no dragons had ever flown into space. On his birthday, Bob's parents bought him a telescope so that he could see the night sky in greater detail. Bob loved his telescope and used it every night, but he still had questions about outer space and decided the best way to get answers was to fly into space and explore it himself. His parents agreed but didn't know how he would get there. He could try flying, but it was a long way to travel, and where would he stop for a rest if he wanted one? Bob said he would need a spaceship, and because his parents had always told him he could do whatever he set his mind to, he said he would build one himself. With his parents' help and some more books from the library, Bob built a spaceship. He painted it bright yellow and added some red Go Faster stripes along the sides. He practiced flying the spaceship through the mountains, much to the surprise of the other dragons who lived there. Before long, it was time for Bob to head into outer space. He put on his best t-shirt and shorts, brushed his teeth, and used the bathroom. His mum gave him a packed lunch for the journey, and his dad gave him a flask of peppermint tea. Bob climbed into the spaceship, waved to his parents through the window, and set off on his first voyage into space. Upwards he soared, high above the mountains, up and up, high above the earth, up and up and up, until the sky turned from light blue to dark navy. Bob the dragon steered his spaceship through sparkling stars and around brightly coloured planets. There was a huge smile on his face. He couldn't believe he was finally travelling through space. It was even better than he had imagined. even more magical. It was like he'd entered another world. He thought about his questions about space and considered counting the stars, but realized there were far too many of them, and it would take a very long time to count them all. He moved closer to a twinkling cluster of stars to see if they were making a noise. He couldn't hear anything, but looking at the beautiful stars up close filled his heart with joy. Bob carried on flying through the sky and decided to stop at some of the planets to see if anyone lived on them. He landed on the nearest planet. It was buttercup yellow and surrounded by a pale orange circle of mist. Bob landed his spaceship on the planet and put on his space helmet. He left the ship and stepped onto the soft surface of the planet. It was covered in bright yellow grass, which tinkled and chimed as he walked over it. There were trees everywhere, and all of them were full of peculiar-looking fruit that Bob had never seen before. 2 aliens wearing gardening gloves appeared from behind a tree and said hello to Bob. They'd never met a dragon before and were delighted to meet him. Bob said he'd never met aliens before and was very pleased to meet them. He stayed a while and chatted to the friendly aliens, then went on his way. He stopped at a few more planets, and all the aliens he met were exceedingly friendly. Bob told them where he lived and invited them to visit his home any time they wanted to. They said they would. Bob went on his way. As he was zooming through the starry sky, Bob noticed something peculiar ahead. A little star was twirling around and seemed to be waving. The star looked like she was dancing. Or was she waving to him? Bob steered his ship closer to get a better look. The star saw Bob and gave him a big, sparkling smile. She moved over to him and floated at the side of his window. She said hello and asked where Bob had come from. When Bob told her about Earth, the star sighed wistfully and said she would love to visit Earth. She had only seen it from up high, but one of her friends had been to Earth recently and said it was beautiful. Bob told the star he could take her on a visit to Earth, and they could go right now. The star was delighted and thanked him. She asked if she could sit on the corner of his window to get a good view of his home planet. Bob said yes, and the star settled herself down on the window. Bob heard her singing happily to herself. Her joyful song made him smile. Bob turned his spaceship around and headed home. After a while, Earth came into view, and as they flew over the ocean, Bob told the star they were heading towards his home in the mountains. The star pointed to the ocean, her eyes wide in wonder. She asked what all that water was. Bob told her. The star said she had learned to swim in the rivers on Mars when she was very young, and she loved swimming. She'd never seen an ocean before and wanted to take a closer look. Before Bob could say he would move closer, the little star leapt off the spaceship's window and flew towards the blue ocean. When she got nearer to the water, she reached her front arms out and dived into it. Bob steered his ship towards the ocean and landed on a sandy beach. He climbed out and stood on the sand. He looked at the vast ocean and wondered how he was going to find the little star in all that water. He didn't want to leave her in the water, not when he had promised to show her his home. Perhaps he should call out for her. Bob didn't know her name, so he called out, "Little star, little star, where are you?" The little star didn't appear from beneath the waves, but someone else did. A mermaid with sparkling silver hair popped up and smiled at the surprised dragon. She swam closer, and her glittery golden tail rose from the water behind her. She said hello to Bob and said she'd heard him calling out for a star and wondered which one he was looking for. Some of her best friends were starfish, and she asked if he was looking for one of them. Her voice was as soft and soothing as the ocean's waves. Bob smiled shyly at the mermaid and explained the star was from the sky. "The sky?" the mermaid said in astonishment. "How can that be?" Bob pointed to the spaceship behind him and told the mermaid how he'd built it and then flown it into space. He explained how he'd met the star and that he was giving her a lift to Earth. With a little grin on his dragon face, Bob said, "But she decided to go for a swim instead." The mermaid laughed softly and said she would go below the water and search for his friend. She introduced herself and said her name was Glittertail. Bob gave his name. Glittertail looked at the spaceship and told Bob she was very impressed that he'd flown into space. Bob explained it had always been a dream of his to go into space, and he had to make it happen somehow. He asked the mermaid if she had any dreams. With a faraway look in her eyes, Glittertail said, "I do have a dream. I want to play football. I've seen children playing football on the beach many times, and there's just something about the game that fills my heart with joy. I wish I could play it. But there's a problem." She lifted her glittery tail in the air and said she wasn't sure how she was going to play football with a tail. Bob remembered how his parents had always told him he could do whatever he set his mind to. He said to Glittertail that there must be a way she could make her dream come true, and he would try to help her if he could. Glittertail smiled at Bob and said, "That's a kind thing to say, thank you. I'll go and find your star now. I won't be long." With a flip of her golden tail, the mermaid disappeared beneath the water. A second later, she popped back up with the twinkling star in her hand. She swam over to Bob and held the star out to him. The star had the most enormous smile on her face and said it was a different world under the sea. There were fish shaped like stars, waving grass that looked like it was dancing, animals with 8 arms, and sparkling rocks that looked like they'd come from space. She asked Bob if he'd ever explored the sea. Bob said he hadn't, but hearing the star talk in such glowing terms made him want to swim in the sea too. "But there's a problem," Bob said. "I don't know how to swim." The little star smiled gently at the dragon and said she was a magical star and she could make wishes come true. And because Bob had given her a lift to Earth, she wanted to repay his kindness and give him a wish. Bob looked at the mermaid, smiled, and told the star he would like to give his wish to Glittertail. Glittertail tried to say no, but Bob insisted. The little star looked up at the mermaid and asked what she'd like to wish for. Glittertail said, "I wish I could play football." The little star floated free from the mermaid's hand. She twinkled brightly, and a shimmering cloud of sparkles appeared around Glittertail. The mermaid's mouth fell open in surprise, and she said, "I've got legs! Bob, I've got legs!" She swished them back and forth in the water and laughed. "I wonder what they feel like to walk on. I hope I don't fall over." Bob waded into the water and held his hand out to the mermaid. Glittertail put her hand in his and slowly placed her feet on the sandy ocean floor. Bob led her out of the water and onto the beach. He kept hold of Glittertail's hand as she got used to her legs. It didn't take her long at all, and she was soon running and skipping along the sand, laughing in delight. Using her magic, the little star made a blue football appear. She threw it over to the dragon and asked if he knew how to play football. Bob did, and spent the next 10 minutes showing Glittertail how to play the game. The little star sat on a rock and watched the dragon and the mermaid kicking the football back and forth as they ran across the sand. Their joyful laughter filled the air, making the star so happy that she glowed brighter and brighter with every second that passed. Whenever someone scored a goal, the star cheered loudly. After a while, Bob and Glittertail decided to have a rest, and they sat next to the resting star. The mermaid wriggled her toes in the soft sand and smiled. She thanked the star for giving her legs. The little star said, "You are welcome. I'll tell you the magic words to use, and you can have your tail back whenever you want. And if you want to have legs again, the same magic words will give you legs again." Glittertail thanked the star again. The star smiled and said she was having a lovely time with them in the sunshine, and it was because of Bob that she was there. The star told Bob he could have another wish, and maybe he'd like a tail this time, so he could go swimming in the ocean with Glittertail. Bob thought that was a great idea, but he had something else in mind. He looked at his spaceship and said his wish would be for Glittertail and the star to go on adventures with him in space. He'd only explored part of it so far, and with the star's help, they could travel beyond the galaxies and perhaps find new planets. The star shone brightly and said she would love that and didn't need to use a wish to make that happen. With a smile, she explained how she'd heard a fable about a planet far, far away that was full of trees who told bedtime stories to visitors. Bob asked Glittertail if she'd like to go with them too, and if so, was she okay keeping her legs a little longer? Glittertail said, "I would love to go with you. Perhaps there's a planet out there where everyone plays football all day." Bob looked up at the endless sky and said anything was possible. Bob, Glittertail, and the little star climbed into the spaceship and took to the sky. Upwards they soared, high above the deep blue ocean. Up and up, high above the earth, up and up, until the sky turned from light blue to navy. Bob the dragon steered his spaceship through sparkling stars and around brightly coloured planets. There was a huge smile on his face. Travelling through space with his new friends at his side made him feel all warm and fuzzy inside. Together, the three friends explored the outer reaches of space. To Glittertail's delight, they did find a planet where aliens played football all day long. She joined in with the games and had a wonderful time. Bob and the star cheered her on from the sidelines. They found a planet that was made of cake, and when they landed on it, the aliens invited them to join them in a cupcake picnic on Raspberry Sponge Hill. The three friends discovered more amazing planets, including one where waterfalls of sparkling lemonade flowed from marshmallow mountains into huge lagoons full of glittering emerald water. The three friends found the mystical planet where trees told bedtime stories to visitors. Bob landed the spaceship on the planet. The friends climbed out and sat down on a soft blanket which had been placed beneath an oak tree. A gentle whisper of a breeze travelled through the leaves of the tree, making a soft, rustling sound. A kind face appeared in the trunk of the tree, and he smiled at the visitors. In a deep, soothing voice, he asked if they were ready to hear a bedtime story. The dragon, mermaid, and star nodded. Bob yawned, and his friends did too. The tree began. Once upon a time, there were two boys called Kieran and Finn, and they lived in a place far away. They loved hearing bedtime stories, and every night, as they listened to one, the words of the stories would gently lull them to sleep. Finn and Kieran's mum stopped talking. She looked over at her sons. They were both fast asleep, all snug and cosy in their beds. She wondered how much of the story they had heard. She would ask them tomorrow. They would probably want to hear it again. Mum walked over to the window and looked up at the starry sky. She smiled. Perhaps there was a dragon in a spaceship up there, going on adventures with a little star and a mermaid with sparkling silver hair called Glittertail. Tonight we're going to discover what makes the moon shine so brightly in our night sky and hear about the amazing journey that led him there. On his journey, he sees many spectacular planets and wonderful sights, and he meets someone very special who becomes a dear friend. I think it's time to begin How the Moon Found His Glow by Gillian Rogerson. Once upon a time, there was a young moon who lived in a magical universe far, far away. It was a universe made of many moons and millions of stars. The young moon loved playing games with the other moons, and they often chased each other in and out of the glimmering stars. He was a happy moon and spent a lot of time smiling and laughing. The little moon was just like the other moons. But then, one day, when he was having a particularly fun time with his friends, something strange happened to him. He began to glow. His friends stopped what they were doing and gazed at his gentle light in wonder. They told him how beautiful his glow was. The moon smiled shyly and thanked them, and then he glowed a little brighter. As time went by, the young moon got used to his glow. He realized that he glowed more brightly when he felt happy. Sometimes, if he wasn't feeling so happy and his glow dimmed, he would think about all his lovely friends and how beautiful the sky was, and his glow would soon return, shining even brighter than before. His moon friends loved looking at his gentle light, and they said seeing the moon's glow always made them feel warm and happy inside. Their kind words made the moon glow even more. One day, the oldest moon in the magical universe asked to see him. When he arrived at her starry home in the sky, she told the young moon that his beautiful light was a special one, and he should consider sharing it with a planet which would greatly benefit from his soothing glow. As there were only moons and stars in the magical universe where the young moon lived, he was confused and asked what a planet was. The old moon replied, "Our universe isn't the only one. There are other universes out there beyond ours. A lot of them have planets, and some of those planets have moons that travel slowly around them. Those moons have a special light, just like yours, and they shine their light over their planets." The young moon said it would be wonderful to shine his light over a planet, but how would he find the right one for him? The wise moon suggested he travel through the universes and have a look at many planets until he found the one that he loved. "But how will I know if I love a planet?" the young moon asked. The older moon smiled and replied, "You will know because you'll glow more brightly than you ever have done before, and you will feel a love for the planet deep inside you." The young moon thought about her words. Exploring other universes would be fun, and if he found a planet to call his home, well, that would be just wonderful. Yet he still had some concerns. He said, I will travel to other universes where the planets are, but if I don't want to stay with any of them, can I come back? Yes, of course, the older moon said gently. There is always a home for you here, but something tells me that the perfect planet is out there just waiting for you. The young moon smiled and said, Really? Waiting for me? I'd better get going then. The older moon wished him luck and said, Please send me a shooting star message when you have found your planet, and I'll let the other moons know about your new home. If you like, we can visit you now and again. Enjoy your adventure. The moon said he would. He glowed brightly, said goodbye, and headed off to find his friends. He told his friends where he was going and why. They were very pleased for their friend and wished him lots of luck. They said they would definitely visit him and couldn't wait to see his special planet. The young moon went on his way through the sparkling skies of the magical moon universe. He wasn't sure which direction he should go in, so he stopped at the side of a group of shimmering stars and asked for their help. The stars were happy to help him and led the moon towards a cloud of twinkling stardust. They told him the cloud was an extra magical one, and it was a portal into another universe, one that had many planets. The moon went through the cloud of twinkling stardust and found himself in another universe. It had just as many stars as the one he had left, and he saw some moons too. But there were some large globes moving slowly in the sky. He had never seen anything like them before. He asked a nearby star if they were planets. They certainly are, the friendly star replied. She twinkled brightly as she looked at the glowing moon. I've never seen you here before. The moon smiled and explained why he was there. The star asked if he would like some help choosing a planet. She had lived alongside them for a very long time and knew a lot about them. The moon said he would like that very much, and he thanked the kind star. The star twinkled some more and said he was very welcome. She took him over to the nearest planet, which was made of pale pink crystals. She told the moon what the planet's name was, but it was such a long name that the moon instantly forgot it and was too shy to ask the star to repeat it. The twinkling star told the young moon that the other moons travelled slowly around their planets in a circle and suggested he do that with the crystal planet to see how he felt about it. She offered to go with him. The glowing moon and the twinkling star circled the pale pink planet. It didn't take long because it was only a small planet. Once they had completed their journey around the planet, the star asked the moon how he felt about it. The moon said, It's a lovely planet, but, well, he didn't know how to put words to his feelings. The star smiled and said, It's not making you glow, is it? The moon gave her a small smile and said, No, it wasn't. Never mind, the star said. There are plenty of other planets here. And if you don't find the right one, I know how to travel to other universes where there are even more planets. I've been to those places before and spoken to many planets. They're so very friendly. I'm sure you'll find the perfect one for you. And if you'd like, I'd be happy to go with you and help you find your special planet." The moon glowed at her kind offer and said he would love that, thank you. The twinkling star and the glowing moon continued on their quest to find the perfect planet. They saw many planets, each one unique and special in its own way. And even though the moon thought they were all beautiful, he could sense that none of them was the right one for him. The star said he shouldn't give up. He agreed and said he was really enjoying their time together. The star said she was too, and twinkled more brightly. They continued on and travelled through more spectacular universes. The moon was having such a lovely time with his new friend, and he didn't mind at all that he still hadn't found his perfect planet. But then they travelled to a universe that felt different to all the other ones. Much, much different. The moon could feel the magic of it. As with the other universes they had been to, there were many planets to look at, but this one had an enormous star, and the planets there were moving slowly around it. It was the biggest star that the moon had ever seen, and he felt the gentle heat of it flowing over him. He asked his friend what the big star was called. The star twinkled and said, "It's called a sun. And this part of the universe is called the solar system. Other universes have suns, but there's only one here. If you look closer at those planets, you'll see that some of them have moons above them." "Oh, wow," the moon replied. He couldn't think of anything else to say. He felt a warmth flowing all through him, and he glowed even more. "Would you like to talk to those moons? Perhaps you can travel around their planets with them and see how you feel." The moon said he would like to do that, but he wasn't brave enough to talk to the other moons. His new friend said she could ask the moons for him if that was okay. The moon said he would like that and thanked his new friend. She really was a great friend, the best a moon could have. The twinkling star and the glowing moon moved over to one of the planets. It had a huge, swirling circle of red gas in the middle of it, and many, many moons. The star said hello to the moons and asked if her friend could join them for a trip around their planet. "Sure," the nearest moon said. "There are 79 of us, and we always have room for one more." The glowing moon joined the others and had a lovely time travelling around the huge planet. His star friend stayed nearby and watched his journey. When he'd been all the way around the big planet, he said thank you to the moons and joined his star friend. She could tell by his expression he'd had a lovely time with the other moons, but that the big planet wasn't the right one for him. "Never mind," she said. "We'll soon find the right one." The moon agreed and said he knew they were getting closer to the perfect planet because he could feel it in his heart. They visited the other moons that were circling their planets. The moons were extremely friendly and invited the glowing moon to join them for a while. The glowing moon had a wonderful time going around each planet with the other moons, but he knew he still hadn't found the right planet. But he wasn't concerned, because he knew he was getting closer and closer to finding the perfect one. As the twinkling star and the glowing moon moved away from another planet that was lovely but not quite right, the star asked if they should leave the solar system and try another universe. The glowing moon didn't answer, because his attention had been fully captured by a beautiful planet in the distance. At first sight, the planet seemed to be completely blue in colour, but when he looked closer, the moon saw glimpses of green on it too. There was something so very captivating about the planet, and the glowing moon couldn't look away from it. He asked the star what the planet was called. She said, "It's called Earth. It's quite beautiful, isn't it?" The moon said it was very beautiful. He asked if Earth had any moons, and if so, he would ask if he could join them on their journey around the beautiful planet. The star said Earth didn't have any moons. She moved closer to her friend and said softly, "But I think it would like one. Why don't you go over and say hello and ask if you can travel around it?" This time the glowing moon didn't feel any shyness at all. Even though he had only just seen the lovely planet, it already felt like a friend. He moved through the dark sky and over to the blue and green planet. His star friend followed him, twinkling brightly. The moon realized the planet was even more beautiful close up. He saw vast oceans, majestic mountains, glimmering gold deserts, and lush green forests. Using his moon magic, he listened to the soft sound of the ocean waves lapping upon the shores, and the gentle wind whispering through the trees of the forest. The soothing sounds filled his heart with love. The planet noticed the glowing moon and said hello to him. The planet's voice was full of warmth and love. She said she'd been waiting for the perfect moon for many years, and now here he was, the most perfect moon of all. The moon glowed and glowed. He asked, "How do you know I'm the right moon for you?" "I can feel it in my heart, at my very core," the planet replied simply. The moon gazed at Earth and felt the love in his heart growing and growing. The planet said to him, "May I ask, would you like to be my moon?" "Oh, yes. I would like that so very much. Yes, please," the moon said. He shone more brightly than he ever had done before. He looked back at his star friend and asked her to come closer. When the planet saw the twinkling star, she said, "Hello. May I say you are the brightest most beautiful star I have ever seen. Would you like to be the brightest star in my night sky? You would be the first one to appear every night, and you'll never be far away from your moon friend." The twinkling star said she would love to stay in the sky above Earth. Upon hearing her words, the moon felt even more love fill his heart. The glowing moon and the twinkling star took up their positions above Earth. The moon told the star he felt like he had finally found his home, and he was so glad he was sharing it with her. The star glittered and glimmered and said she was so very glad they had met. Earth explained how she travelled around the sun, and during her journey, the moon would travel around her. She said it was a kind of celestial dance that the planets and the moons did, and once the moon got used to it, the movements would become very natural to him. She explained about an invisible force that came from her centre, which would hold the moon in place above her sky. She said, "It's a bit like an invisible hug between us, which means you will never drift away from me." The glowing moon listened carefully to every word the planet said. He liked the idea of being held in an invisible hug by her, and it made him feel so very happy and loved. The beautiful planet talked some more and told the moon and the star about how she would evolve over the coming years, and how sometimes her lands and oceans would change positions. Her voice softened and she said, "In years to come, life will appear and thrive in the oceans, on land, and even in the sky." The moon and the star looked at each other and smiled. What an amazing time they were going to have with the beautiful planet. The planet said, "I am extremely glad you have joined me on my journey around the sun. If you have any questions about anything, please ask me, and I'll do my best to answer them." The moon knew he would have plenty of questions as time went by, and he knew the planet would answer him, for he sensed the wisdom in her. He also sensed the love and kindness that flowed from Earth and out into the universe. And so their journey began. The blue and green planet travelled slowly around the sun with the glowing moon and the twinkling star close companions. The moon glowed brightly and cast his golden beams of light across the surface of the earth. Each moonbeam highlighted the beauty of Earth and made the moon love the planet even more. The moon saw his reflections in the vast oceans, the flowing rivers, and even in puddles after the rain. His loving connection to the beautiful planet grew deeper and stronger. Time went by, and the moon and the star watched in wonder as life began to evolve on the planet below them. They saw life in the oceans appearing, and were amazed at how different the creatures were from the tiny fish that darted along the ocean floor to the huge whales that swam majestically through the waves. They watched birds soaring through the sky, blissfully caught on a breeze and letting the wind take them outwards. They witnessed animals appearing on the land, those who lived in jungles and those who set up homes in snowy landscapes. The moon and star often watched the animals who came out at night, the ones who gazed lovingly at the glowing moon and the twinkling star in the dark sky. The beautiful planet continued to provide everything that was needed for those who lived on her lands and in the ocean. The moon continued to glow, and the star continued to twinkle. Many more years passed, and humans started to appear on the planet. They were completely different to anything else the moon had seen before. Not only did they begin to travel around the planet and set up homes in many different places, but whenever he appeared at night, the humans would stop what they were doing and look up at him in wonder and admiration. Their love for the glowing moon rose from the planet and flowed over him. He glowed and glowed, and just when he thought he couldn't possibly glow any more, the kind humans did something else. They started to create art that showed their deep love for him. They painted pictures of the moon in many different settings, over towns, above the oceans, and peeping through branches of tall trees. They wrote poems about him, expressing their love for his beauty and the light he brought to the world. They wrote stories too, long ones filled with adventure and unforgettable characters, and shorter ones that they read to their children at night as they snuggled down in their beds. The moon heard every word, and he beamed brightly in the night sky. The kind humans wrote songs about him as well, and sometimes they would sit on grassy hills at twilight and share their wonderful melodies with him. Many people danced beneath the light of the moon, falling in love with each other and also falling deeper in love with the moon. Every night he would hear the children of the planet sending out soft calls of, "Good night, moon, sweet dreams." The moon would send an extra moonbeam over their homes and silently wish them good night and sweet dreams too. There came a time when some of his human friends travelled through the sky on a rocket and landed on his surface. He was so very pleased to see them and made them as welcome as he possibly could. Sometimes his magical moon friends came to visit him. When humans appeared on the planet, the moons used their magic to make themselves invisible because they didn't want to confuse the people below. The other moons agreed that Earth was a very special planet. The kind humans sent their love and appreciation to the stars too, and created pictures, poems, and songs about them as well. And just as the sun had said, the moon's star friend was always the first star to appear every night. When the people saw her, they would make a wish upon her twinkling light and send love her way. Hearing their wishes, made the star twinkle even more. And seeing his friend twinkle made the moon glow even more brightly. The moon was so glad he had made the journey through the universes in search of the perfect planet, and he felt so very thankful to be able to share his special light with all those who lived on the planet. He loved them so very dearly, and he knew from the love that came his way that they loved him too. That love continued to make him glow and glow and glow. This is The Dream Givers Meet the Tooth Fairy by Alicia Ainsley. You might think that daytime is the best time, when all the most exciting things happen, but that is not necessarily the case. Hidden within the darkness of the night sky is a whole other world of wonder. In fact, nighttime is perhaps the most magical. It's when the unbelievable happens and the fairies come out. They flitter-flutter between the stars, casting their sparkling magic across the world to make our dreams more enchanting and the waking days that follow that bit more special. Some of those fairies include the Dream Givers, our trusty tiny friends with blue, shimmering skin and pretty wings who ensure that we sleep soundly, enjoying the happiest of fantasies until we wake. Other fairies that come out at night are the Tooth Fairies, the cheerful little fays who collect our fallen teeth from beneath our pillows and replace them with gifts. Both types of fairy have their own important jobs, but every now and then they require a little help from each other to take care of us humans. One night, the Dream Giver family trio, Orion, Cosmo, and Astrid, set out for their evening of work, delivering sweet dreams, as normal. They had no idea that their duties would extend much further tonight when they bumped into an old friend. Orion and his two children, Cosmo and Astrid, were sweeping through the night sky above town, when all of a sudden, Orion spotted a familiar pair of wings ahead. He would recognize them anywhere. It was a tooth fairy who he knew well, called Annabelle. "Good evening, Annabelle," Orion called eagerly across the rooftops. Annabelle turned around and waved back. "Good evening, Orion," she shouted in return. "It's lovely to see you." Her wings sparkled with glitter as she approached her friend, and the Dream Giver's blue skin shimmered a little brighter. Orion and Annabelle went way back. They'd known each other ever since they were young fairies at school. The two old friends fluttered over to each other and hugged. They were thrilled to see each other. Orion asked Annabelle how her evening was going. "Have you collected lots of shiny, healthy teeth to add to your palace in the sky?" he teased. Surprisingly, Annabelle sighed and replied, "Actually, not really. Work is turning out to be a little trickier than usual. I have a few customers who've turned out to be quite a handful." Orion asked Annabelle why. The Tooth Fairy explained that her night had been going well until she reached the house of a little boy named Jasper. Annabelle had heard word that little Jasper had lost his first ever tooth. She was excited to visit him for the first time, but when she arrived at his house and peered through his bedroom window, Jasper was still wide awake. He was busy playing with his toys, refusing to go to sleep. He was too excited by the prospect of a visit from the Tooth Fairy to be able to switch off for bed. There was no way that Annabel could collect Jasper's fallen tooth whilst he was still awake. So she decided to try a different home in the meantime and come back later. However, it all went further downhill from there. Annabel moved on to the next house, where a young girl called Sadie was sleeping with a fallen tooth resting under her pillow. But as Annabel silently flew into the little girl's room to retrieve the tooth, she realized that it was going to be harder than she originally thought. Sadie appeared to be having a bad dream and tossed and turned relentlessly in her bed, so much so that Annabel couldn't get under Sadie's pillow to grab the tooth. Annabel had many other names on her list for that evening, so she continued to fly around the houses in search of other fallen teeth, hoping that when she eventually returned later, Sadie's dream would have passed. But Annabel's bad luck didn't stop there. At another house, Annabel came across a girl called Zainab lying in her bed. At first, Annabel thought that Zainab was fast asleep, and so she flew straight into the room. That is, until she heard Zainab singing to herself from under her covers. Annabel quickly ducked out of sight and hid behind a porcelain doll on a shelf to prevent the little girl from seeing her. From what Annabel could see, Zainab was lying in bed, desperately trying to fall asleep, but she couldn't seem to drift off. The little girl was attempting to sing herself lullabies, count sheep in her head, and read storybooks by nightlight, but nothing seemed to be working. Annabel crept out of Zainab's room without being spotted, but once outside, she sat down on the windowsill defeatedly. She now had 3 separate children whose teeth she had to collect this evening, but couldn't get to. "I'm absolutely exhausted," Annabel confessed. "I'm usually home and in bed by now. But each time I go back to check on Jasper, Sadie, and Zainab, I still can't get to their teeth." Orion patted his friend on the shoulder. That did sound like a difficult night. Young Cosmo felt sorry for Annabel as he listened to her story, but it sparked a great idea in his mind. What if they could help? "Annabel, we could try to help you if you like," the young dream giver suggested. "4 sets of wings are better than 1. His sister Astrid eagerly added, "Yeah, and don't worry about the girl called Sadie. We can definitely help you with that one. We are experts at delivering good dreams." Annabel was touched by the young dream giver's offer to help. "Are you sure?" she checked. "I don't want to intrude on your own work tonight." But Orion agreed with his children. They could always spare some time to help out others, especially a good friend like Annabel. So, with her new assistants in tow, Annabel led the way to the houses of the children she was still yet to get to. Firstly, they visited Jasper. As expected, little Jasper was still sitting on his bedroom floor, playing. Toys from his toy box were strewn across the carpet, and dozens of jigsaw pieces were scattered on the ground, whilst Jasper attempted to put them all together. The 4 fairies all peered through the window and watched him. Orion whispered, "It's no wonder that Jasper isn't asleep yet. He's keeping his brain awake by doing that tricky puzzle." Astrid whispered back, "Exactly. We need to make his bed look even more appealing down the jigsaw." "How can we do that?" Annabelle, the Tooth Fairy, asked. "Surely if Jasper wants to play, then the last thing he will want to do is climb into bed." "Maybe," Cosmo muttered, "unless we can make his bed look even more enticing." Orion smiled smugly and whispered, "I have an idea." The four fairies huddled together while Orion relayed the plan. They all agreed it was worth a try, so they each slipped into little Jasper's bedroom and hid in their relevant places, getting into position to execute Orion's plan. When Orion gave the signal, they began. First, Astrid switched on the nightlight perched on Jasper's bedside cabinet, and suddenly the lighting in the room changed. Instead of the bright yellow bulb radiating out from his bedside lamp, the nightlight cast a relaxing blue glow across the bedroom walls and created the visual effect of waves bobbing and flowing across the ceiling. Jasper's bedroom suddenly looked like it was underwater. "Wow," Astrid whispered. "This looks so cool." Little Jasper noticed the change in his bedroom and let out a confused yawn. Next, Cosmo whispered to the fancy speaker sitting on Jasper's bedroom shelf, "Play relaxing music." And out of nowhere it began emanating soft piano music, with the tranquil sounds of rolling sea waves and whale calls in the background. The little boy's eyes started to droop as drowsiness swept over his body. And lastly, while Jasper was distracted by the soothing sounds and the light show on his ceiling, Annabelle dived under Jasper's pillow and pocketed his fallen tooth, wrapped up in a piece of tissue. In its place, she left a single gold coin for Jasper to find when he next reached under his pillow. Then she pulled back the corner of Jasper's duvet cover and plumped up the cushion to make it look extra enticing to lay his head on. Just as Annabelle disappeared out of Jasper's line of sight, Orion sprinkled a little dream dust across Jasper's pillow, so that when the little boy turned to gaze at his bed, it glowed with a mesmerizing twinkle that he couldn't resist. The little boy yawned again and made his way over to his bed. He suddenly felt very tired. Jasper left the unfinished pieces of his jigsaw puzzle on the floor and climbed under his duvet. He closed his eyes, snuggled his head into the comfy cushion, and slipped his hand under the pillow to check his tooth was still there. To the little boy's amazement, instead of his tooth, he felt a smooth, circular coin between his fingertips. Jasper pulled out the coin and held it up in front of his sleepy face, grinning. "Thank you, Tooth Fairy," the little boy whispered gratefully into the air. Then the little boy held the coin close to his chest protectively and peacefully drifted off to sleep. Annabelle, Orion, Cosmo and Astrid all soundlessly flew out of the room and back into the night air. "That worked perfectly," Annabelle celebrated once they were out of earshot of little Jasper. "Thank you so much." Astrid smiled with pride and said, "Well, we know a thing or two about sleep. Our next stop is Sadie's house, Annabelle announced. Annabelle and the dream givers flew across town and arrived at Sadie's bedroom window. When they peeked through the window pane, it was clear to see that poor Sadie was stuck in the throes of a bad dream. Thankfully, Annabelle had enlisted the help of the perfect fairies to assist. "Poor Sadie," murmured Cosmo as the dream givers floated over to her bedside. "It looks like she's having a pretty unpleasant dream." Orion reached into his satchel of dream dust and sprinkled some golden grains over the little girl's head. "Let's take a look, shall we?" he said. Orion opened up a mystical dream portal into Sadie's mind, and the 3 dream givers looked inside. Annabelle peeked over their shoulders to catch a glimpse of the dream givers in action, and was amazed by what she saw. Inside the dream portal, they could all see Sadie stuck in her bad dream. Annabelle had never seen anything quite like it before. The dream played out like a movie inside Sadie's mind, and the fairies could all watch it in the dream portal with front row seats, although none of them particularly liked this movie. Annabelle whispered, "Poor Sadie. Do you think you can do anything for her?" Luckily, the dream givers knew exactly how to turn Sadie's frown upside down and transform her bad dream into a good one. Orion smiled and turned to his daughter Astrid. "Have you got an idea for how to fix this dream?" he asked her. Astrid rubbed her hands together with glee and replied, "I sure do." Astrid moved forward and began waving her hands around above the dream portal. Annabelle watched on as the movie scene inside Sadie's mind magically began to transform. Astrid expertly crafted a delightful dream for sleeping Sadie. In the dream, Sadie was on a school trip to visit the zoo. But it wasn't just any zoo. It was a zoo full of talking animals. Sadie cracked jokes with the monkeys and chatted with the giraffes. She listened to wise stories from the elephants and caught a fit of the giggles with the hyenas. All of the animals were so friendly, and Sadie and her school friends had an absolute blast meeting them all. In particular, Sadie bumped into a rogue penguin that had escaped from its paddock. The penguin ushered Sadie and her friends to follow along, and they trailed the penguin all the way into the secret open area where there were hundreds of different species of butterflies. The garden was brimming with beautiful, delicate, multicolored butterfly wings that gracefully flitted around the trees and flowers that adorned this secret garden. Sadie and her friends admired the stunning array of flying insects, and a particularly pretty monarch butterfly with orange and black striped wings landed on her shoulder to rest and recite poetry in her ear. Sadie blissfully listened to the butterfly and laid down in the grass within the secret garden, watching the other butterflies soar above, with a talking penguin by her side. Astrid had managed to turn Sadie's bad dream right around. The pleasant dream instantly calmed Sadie, and a sleepy smile crept across her face. As soon as Sadie settled down and her head lay still, Annabelle used the opportunity to slip underneath Sadie's pillow, grab her lonely tooth, and leave a silver coin in its place. With the tooth successfully safe in her bag, Annabelle joined Orion, Cosmo, and Astrid over by the window. 2 down, only 1 to go, the Tooth Fairy proclaimed, and they all dashed off through the sky to their final house of the night, Zainab's house. It was getting fairly late, and it wouldn't be long until the sun rose and Zainab would wake for school, so they had to act fast. Time was running out. The fairies reached Zainab's home and could see that she was still wide awake. Annabelle commented, "Zainab has been awake for hours now. I wonder why she can't sleep." The dream givers watched the little girl meticulously counting sheep in her head. Orion observed, "It looks like she's keeping her mind working by counting and speaking aloud to herself. All Zainab needs is a little help to relax and switch off her brain properly." Orion, Cosmo, and Astrid nodded at each other, as if reading each other's minds, and then slunk under the window pane to secretly enter Zainab's bedroom. Annabelle watched as the dream givers all perched around Zainab's headboard and started working their sleepy magic. First, Cosmo sprinkled some dream dust onto Zainab's forehead, and Annabelle could see that Zainab immediately felt calmer. She stopped counting and sighed with relief. Her head sunk a little further back into her puffy pillow, and the muscles in her face relaxed. Then Astrid began whispering a bedtime story to Zainab. As Zainab's attention drifted away from her own mind to focus on the story, she was visibly becoming sleepier and sleepier. As Astrid told the story, Orion ever so slowly closed her bedroom curtains a little bit tighter so that no trickles of moonlight could light up the room. By the time Zainab's room was shrouded in peaceful darkness, the little girl had finally closed her eyes, and her breathing had slowed to the rhythm of a gentle slumber. To seal the deal, the dream givers opened a dream portal and gave Zainab a delightful dream to keep her from waking up. Finally, feeling like the coast was clear, Annabelle squeezed into Zainab's room and made her way over to the bedside table to collect the tooth. She spotted the little box on Zainab's bedside table and flew over to it, while the dream givers successfully tucked her into bed. To Annabelle's surprise, next to the tooth box was a handwritten note. Annabelle hovered closer and read the note. Zainab had sweetly written a thank you letter for the Tooth Fairy. It read, "Dear Tooth Fairy, thank you for visiting me tonight to collect my tooth. I have been brushing my teeth twice a day, and my dentist says that I'm doing a really good job at keeping my teeth white. I hope you like my teeth too. I hope you have a nice night and aren't too busy flying around the world. Love from Zainab." Annabelle picked up the piece of paper gratefully and folded it up until it was so teeny tiny that it could fit in her pocket. Annabelle liked to keep mementos from her visits where possible, and this was such a lovely letter that she wanted to keep it safe and close. With their mission complete, the 4 fairies flew out of Zainab's room and into the night. Once they were way above the rooftops and closer to the stars, they paused to celebrate their triumphs of the evening. "Thank you so much for all your help," Annabelle gushed, hugging each of the dream givers. "I don't know if I would have completed all of my work tonight if it weren't for you." Orion, Cosmo, and Astrid were happy to have helped. Their life's purpose was to help children and adults sleep soundly. With all of her teeth collected for the night, Annabelle wished the dream givers a good night and flew off into the night sky to return to her Tooth Fairy Palace. Orion, Cosmo, and Astrid looked to the sky and noticed that the dark blue air was changing with every passing minute. Trickles of lighter blue and wobbly streaks of orange were beginning to meander through the sky until it looked like a watercolor painting. "What is happening to the sky?" Cosmo asked his father curiously. Orion explained that morning was just around the corner, and the sun was starting to rise from her peaceful bed. Cosmo and Astrid had never stayed up late enough to see the sun rise before. They had usually finished their night's work long before now. "It's beautiful," Astrid sighed, her eyes twinkling in the golden hues of the morning sky. "Can we stay out a little longer and watch the sunrise?" Orion hesitated at first, but then softened and smiled. That sounded like a lovely idea. Orion, Cosmo, and Astrid settled themselves on the branch of a tree, hidden within the thick, luscious leaves, so that nobody would see them now that it was getting lighter. They relaxed and watched over the tops of the rooftops as the huge orange sun began to rise over the horizon. Cosmo and Astrid were absolutely mesmerized by the stunning scene, and Orion had to admit that he was captivated too. It had been a long time since Orion had stayed up all night to watch the sunrise. The three dream givers watched the sunrise in silence, and little Cosmo and Astrid gradually rested their heads on their father's shoulders. It was way past their bedtime, and as the glowing sun rose higher and higher in the sky, their eyes became heavier and heavier until they were half asleep, resting on Orion's shoulders. "Good morning, Daddy," Astrid whispered as she slipped into a sweet dream there in the treetop. "Good morning, Astrid," Orion responded, stroking her head as she drifted off. Orion looked to Cosmo and saw that he was already fast asleep. He hugged his two children close and laid them down on the branch, plucked two big green leaves from the tree, and laid them across his children like blankets. While his children slept, Orion watched over them as the houses and streets came to life with the sun returning light to their sleepy world. "Another successful night complete," Orion said to himself contentedly as he settled himself into the bark of the tree trunk and relaxed. This is The Kiwi Who Dreamed of the Sky by Susanna McLaughlin. In a vast green forest, on a little island far away in a shining ocean, lived a little bird named Tia. Tia wasn't just any bird. She was a kiwi. Kiwis are about the size of a small chicken, with plump, pear-shaped bodies covered in fuzzy, tufty, grey-speckled fur. They're very cuddly little things that look like pom-poms, perched atop two little stilt-like legs. They have long, thin beaks, perfect for poking in holes and nibbling seeds. But what makes the kiwi bird the most unusual is that they don't have any wings. They don't fly, you see, preferring to toddle around in the underbrush, finding the nuts and fruits that tumble from the tallest trees. Tia was an exceptionally feathery kiwi, which is really saying something. She was like a ball of fluff, with two kind brown eyes and a smiling beak, and exceptionally large feet. She used these to run, whizzing around the forest at night, singing as she went. She was a little explorer, running from bush to bush, seeking other birds and creatures to play with. She had been raised under a tall fern tree in the heart of the forest, and once she became fully grown and left the burrow, she'd begun to explore further. She would tootle about the clearing at first, nervously darting from behind her mum's legs and smelling all the new smells of the rainforest. Little by little, with support from her mum, Tia became braver and more adventurous, and soon she was old enough to put on her sun hat and head out on her own explorations. Now, Tia had gotten to know every inch of the forest. She would dig a new burrow every day with her strong feet, snoozing through the sunlight hours. She would emerge at dusk to explore new clearings, marvelling at the growth of the saplings, nibbling at the offerings of the towering trees, watching the stars, or dancing her splish-splash dance in the rain. The stars were amazing in the forest. You could see so many of them between the trees that the whole sky glowed misty white. Sometimes Tia would plop down on her round bottom and look for shapes in the constellations. At forest school, when she was a child, she had been too busy learning about the trees, flowers, and delicious foods of the rainforest to learn about the constellations all the way up in the sky. So she'd made up her own, spotting patterns in the stars for herself. There was a crescent-shaped cluster to the east that she thought looked like a dolphin jumping from the water. One to the south that she thought twisted into the twirly-whirly shape of a fern's new leaf, and one right overhead that was round and friendly-looking that she thought was a kiwi, just like her. The forest offered Tia endless opportunities to play. The ground was covered with spongy moss to bounce on, and crisscrossed with rocky paths which made perfect racetracks. There were sparkling waterfalls to swim in, and birds to chatter with. She loved talking to all kinds of birds, even the tuis, who she could barely understand. The tuis have gleaming dark feathers that shimmer in beautiful jewel tones in the moonlight, and the smartest little ball of white feathers tucked under their chins. They are very sophisticated-looking birds, but they talk in the most unusual robotic voices, babbling and burbling to each other, with whistles and crackles between their words. Tia barely knew what they were talking about, but she would giggle along with them anyway, enjoying their funny company. The forest was so big it seemed endless to Tia, especially since the trees were so very tall. The tallest palm trees and fan-like ferns seemed to tower so far above her head that Tia felt tiny tucked up in her little burrow. She would zoom around from clearing to clearing all night and spend her days snoozing underground, enjoying the warm sun that trickled into her cozy spot in the undergrowth. One day, Tia awoke with a yawn, opening her beak wide and stretching her feathers. She blinked a few times and emerged into the dusk, whilst the rest of the forest was winding down for bedtime. Above her, a tui bird was perched on a branch, singing his funny song. Tia called up a cheery hello. The tui looked down at her and wished her a good evening. He said she had caught him just as he was about to take his nighttime flight before he settled down in his nest for sleep. At least, Tia thought that was what he said. Tia beamed up at him. The stars must look amazing from up there. Can you say hello to the constellations for me? There's a Kiwi up there who I sometimes talk to, but I'm not sure she can hear little me chattering from all the way down here. The tui giggled and said he would, spreading his gleaming wings and soaring into the sky, until all Tia could see was the little white tuft on his neck disappearing amongst the stars. Tia sank down onto the soil and wondered what the tui must see from up there. He could probably see the whole forest, stretched far and wide over the hills towards the sea. Maybe he could see the town where the people live, and the sea, and mountains beyond. Tia closed her eyes and imagined it. If only she could take a flight too and see the world from the sky. Even humans could fly in the little metal contraptions she saw soaring overhead from time to time. Why couldn't the Kiwi? Tia knew who she could ask. She called out for her friend Nico, who lived at the foot of a tall and spindly palm tree in the next clearing to the one she found herself in. She let out a calling of Kiwi, Kiwi, and soon heard heavy little feet padding through the undergrowth towards her. Nico was an old Kiwi who had lived in the forest since long before Tia was born. She often came to him with questions such as this one. Nico had the sparkle of wisdom in his eye, and his fur was greyer than most, so Tia knew his answers were always right. Why can't Kiwis fly? She asked Nico. Nico explained to Tia that many, many years ago, a very brave and honourable Kiwi had given up his right to fly in order to look after the forest floor. And this is why Kiwis had no wings. Tia puffed her chest in pride. She was very good at looking after the forest floor. She was proud of having no wings. Besides, who needed wings when you could run as fast as her? But she would love to see what the other birds could see from the sky. Nico smiled wisely. You don't need wings to see the world from the sky, Tia, he said. Think of the parrots who live in the mountains. Yes, they can soar on the wind, but their very favourite view of the world is from the comfort of their nests on the mountain tops, where your feet could be firmly on the ground as you look out at the world below you. Tia thought for a moment. But how would I get up the mountains without wings? She asked Nico. Nico chuckled. With your sturdy, speedy feet, of course, he told her. He told Tia to wait for a moment and retreated to his burrow, nestled behind a kawa bush. She heard the ruffling of paper and a couple of thuds from within his burrow as Nico searched through his belongings. He was muttering to himself as he searched. Eventually, Tia heard the aha, which meant Nico had found what he was looking for. Tia saw Nico's long beak emerge from the bushes, followed by his furry body. He was clutching a roll of parchment between his toes. He rolled it out and Tia took in the markings. She pointed to a sketch of trees. That's the forest, she said. And a swathe of blue. That's the ocean. She pointed to a collection of houses. That's the town. And a big, jagged mountain range. There they are. Nico nodded. Follow the map, he said, and you'll be able to see the view from the sky, too. And do say hello to the friends you meet along the way. There's a lot of friendly, feathery folk out there, and some not so feathery, too. Tia smiled. She was no stranger to missions and quests, but this would be the first to lead her out of the forest. Tia stretched her legs, put on her beige bucket hat, and packed some berries and the map into her adventure bag. She strapped her bag across her body and wished Nico a good evening as she headed off on her adventure. For a long while, Tia ambled through the quiet of the forest, past the trickling creek and through the greenest moss. It was a warm, calm evening, and she smiled and whistled to herself as she went. She hopped across the waterfall pool, from stone to stone, and weaved between the prehistoric-looking ferns and the wide, smooth trunks of kauri trees. She took a couple of detours, following funny sounds and friendly birds, and stopping for a quick bite to eat with a fluffy little bat. But after a long night, a day's nap, and another evening, Tia reached the edge of the forest. Before her stretched hilly fields and a long, winding country road. She walked through the long grass beside the road, pausing to chat with some friendly cows. They had curly fur in dark amber and black, with stripes of white across their bellies, and they blinked their long eyelashes and munched sleepily on the grass below their feet. The cows mooed low hellos to Tia and plodded over to the fence to greet her. They thought it was unusual to see a kiwi outside of the forest. The cows lowered their big heads and pricked their wide furry ears as Tia explained to them her mission. Many of the cows had visited the foothills of the mountains, spending sleepy summer days grazing on the long, dry mountain grass, but they'd never been in the forest. The grass there wasn't so green and delicious, and this was what cows valued above all else. Tia explained the variety of nuts and seeds they had in the forest, and she offered the cows some to try, but they kindly shook their big heads, insisting nothing could be more delicious to them than fresh, dewy grass. They wished Tia a happy journey and watched her with their big brown eyes as she scuttled away, heading towards the mountain. Before long, Tia reached the town. It was quiet and dark, and Tia stopped her whistling, enjoying the sleepy air and not wanting to wake anyone snoozing nearby. All the humans would be asleep by now, tucked up tight in their beds. As she wandered through the town, she met a little fantail who just couldn't sleep. The tiny, fairy-like bird with the fanning peacock-like tail was flitting from left to right, twirling and fluttering from hedge to hedge, branch to branch. She danced on the breeze around Tia's head, inviting her to play chase through the gardens. Tia whizzed after the little bird, giggling and chuckling as she continuously evaded her grasp. Tia jumped into the air, trying to tag the little bird, but she always expertly flitted out of reach at the very last minute. Soon, the two collapsed into the grass, grinning at one another. Once she'd caught her breath, the fantail said goodnight to Tia and flew away to her nest. Tia continued on her journey, weaving from garden to garden, rustling through the bushes, smelling sweet tropical flowers here and there. She paused on the lawn at one house, looking up at a particularly tasty-smelling bird feeder. As she stood there, gazing up at the delicious seeds hanging way overhead, a light clicked on. She stood in the grass, enjoying its warm glow, and before long, two children came to the window, peeking out at her with excited smiles. Two dogs soon followed, pressing their noses against the glass. Tia gave them a friendly smile and squeaked a Kiwi, and they waved back happily. A few gardens down, Tia noticed some fruit hanging from a trellis overhead. It grew on a twisting vine, and as she watched, one fell and rolled to her feet. Tia inspected the fruit with wonder. It was brown and fuzzy, and looked rather familiar. In fact, it looked just like her. She gave it a nibble with her beak and found bright green tangy flesh dotted with sour black seeds. It was delicious, and she savoured the fruit, saying a thank you into the air intended for their gardener. She ate half of the slightly squashed fruit and put the rest in her satchel for later. After the delicious snack, she laid out on her back for a short while and poked her feet in the air, giving them a rest after they'd carried her so far. She looked at the map as she lay there. She wasn't far from the mountains now. As the sun began to rise, she could see them glistening in the distance. This made her too excited for her usual nap, and she put her sun hat on her head and set off on the path towards the sky. As she left the town, she crossed a creek. On the bank, enjoying the morning rays, lay a dragon. At least, Tia thought it was a dragon. The creature had leathery green skin and gleaming eyes, and a wide smile. It was a toothless, friendly smile. Small white spikes went down the ridge of his back and along his wide pointed tail. He had wide splayed feet, and he barely moved, stretched out on his belly, totally relaxed. Tia flopped down beside him and wished him a good morning. He wished her a good morning in return. He spoke very slowly, as if in slow motion, and moved his head slowly to smile at her. He introduced himself as Tua and said it was short for Tuatara. Tia introduced herself and complimented him on his impressive name. He inquired about her journey. When Tia told him that she had come from the forest, Tua smiled. "So, you know Nico, the wise old Kiwi of the forest." Tia nodded and told him proudly that Nico was a good friend of hers. Tua told her that Nico had passed this way many years ago on an adventure, wearing a funny hat and a little satchel just like her. Tia wasn't surprised. Kiwis were an adventurous sort. Tua told her that Nico had been coming down the mountain when they met, and that he told Tua that he had made friends with an alpine parrot who had shown him the way. He told Tia that all she needed to do to call the bird was coo Kia into the air. That was how the alpine parrots called to one another. Tia thanked Tua and gave him the remainder of the tangy green fruit from her satchel, which he accepted happily. He told Tia that the humans called these kiwi fruit, as they looked so much like the little bird. Tia was tickled pink to learn that the humans loved kiwi birds so much that they dedicated such a delicious fruit to them. Tua munched the kiwi fruit contentedly as he waved Tia off onto the path that led up the mountain. Before long, Tia found herself padding up the path into the clouds. She was so excited that she skipped and hopped every other step for a while, skipping and hopping more and more often until she eventually burst into a run. She looked like a cloud herself, whizzing along the path towards the sky. She weaved through the feet of a couple of hikers in a blur of feathers. Before long, Tia was in the shelter of tall pine trees, hopping over rocks and roots and brushing past shrubs. The little kiwi stopped, panting in the shade of a fern. She could tell that she was high up here, but all she could see was trees. She looked this way and that, but all she saw was trees. Where was the sky? She needed some special help. She threw back her head and whistled a kia, and before she knew it, a beautiful parrot soared into the clearing. She was feathered in gleaming green, with flashes of vibrant orange underneath each wide wing. She had a hooked beak, the top curling around the bottom, which gave her a cute little smile, adding to the kindness in her green eyes. She swooped down and introduced herself as Kia. "I thought you were Nico, but you're much fluffier and much less silver-haired," Kia said. Tia introduced herself and they shook talons. Kia said she was very pleased to meet Tia. and Tia agreed. Kia and her friends lived in the mountains, swooping from peak to peak, playing games with hikers and trying to nibble on their snacks when they weren't looking. Kia had the strongest, most beautiful wings, which Tia looked at in awe. "You're so lucky you can fly," Tia said. "Well, you're lucky to have such strong feet," Kia replied. "How far you must have climbed to get here. And you're lucky to be small enough to forage in the undergrowth. You must get the most delicious berries of all. Anyway, you're about to see the world from on high too. It's just this way." Kia led Tia through the trees, swooping through the air ahead of her, until they reached the very peak of the mountain. "Just a few steps more," Kia said, "and you'll reach the tippy top of the mountain." Tia thanked Kia with a dazzling smile, and the parrot spread her wings and took off to the sky. It was breathtaking. Tia's home lay spread out beneath her, underneath wisps of white cloud. Ahead of her was the sky, bright blue and vaster than Tia had ever imagined. The forest spread out far into the distance, an endless carpet of green treetops, and hills rippled in the land beyond. The sea sparkled in the distance, and the town looked tiny from here, like the little ant villages in the forest. Tia now knew why her home was called Land of the Long White Cloud. The island expanded in wisps in the sky blue of the ocean. Tia the Kiwi didn't need to fly. No view could be better than this. She plopped down on her bottom and slumped back for a nap. You couldn't do that whilst flying. When she awoke, it was dusk, and the sky had begun to darken with smudges of pink and orange. Before long, the stars came out to twinkle in the sky. The dolphin constellation was visible first, and then the fern, and then the kiwi, right overhead. Tia gazed up at her and smiled. Maybe she was close enough now for the kiwi in the stars to hear her. "Kiwi," she cooed in greeting. And, to her surprise, a response was sung out in the night. Not from above, but from behind her. Tia propped herself up and turned, just as someone emerged from the bush behind her. It was another kiwi, feathers all ruffled and messy, with his own adventure hat, which was similar to a cowboy hat in style, but made in the softest blue felt. He had a satchel slung over his shoulder too, with his own map and snacks bursting from the pockets. He bounded over to Tia and plopped down at her side. "Who needs to fly?" he said merrily, looking out at the view. "When you're adventurous and strong like a kiwi," Tia agreed. Our feet can take us anywhere, and we get to meet everyone who crosses our path. Tia and her new friend gazed down on the world, pointing out the forest, amazed by how far they had come and about how much they had yet to explore. Koko Helps Kira Get Back to Sleep by Luke Prendergast. Deep in the heart of a faraway forest stood a cozy wooden cabin. Inside the cabin lived a family of koalas. One evening, the whole family sat at the dinner table in their little wooden cabin, eating a delicious meal of eucalyptus stew. Kira, however, was rather fidgety. She simply couldn't keep still. She kept hopping up and down on her seat and wiggling her bum and wiggling her little toes. "What's going on with you this evening, Kira?" their mum asked her gently. "I've never seen you this restless before. Is something wrong?" "Oh, no, Mum," Kira replied. "There's nothing wrong at all. Quite the contrary. In fact, there's something very right." Her mum raised an inquisitive eyebrow, and Kira explained that the next day her year at Sleepy Forest Elementary School were going on a school trip to the other side of the forest, where there was a high ropes course. There were ladders on trees and wooden bridges in the canopies, and zip wires that brought you back down to the forest floor. "It's a panda bear's dream," she squealed, almost tipping off her chair. And it was also the reason she was so restless. She was too full up with excitement to sit still. She simply couldn't wait for tomorrow to come. Koko and Kira's mum laughed a sweet, chuckling laugh. "Well, I'm very excited for you too, Kira. But you're going to have to settle down and eat your food and get a good night's sleep. You're going to need to be well fed and well rested for all that tree climbing tomorrow." As per usual, her mother, who was a very wise koala indeed, was right. Kira did need to make sure she had plenty of energy for her school trip, so she did her best to keep her excitement under control, and she finished off every last mouthful of her eucalyptus stew. She even asked for seconds. When they had finished their dinner, Koko let out a big yawn. And, because yawns can be terribly catching like that, Kira let out a big yawn too. "Wow," said Koko. "You might actually be tired, Kira. Come on, let's go and get ready for bed while you're yawning already. Hopefully you'll be able to sleep the whole night through." Koko and Kira went to their room. They changed into their pajamas. Koko wore a blue pajama shirt and some blue shorts because blue was his favourite colour. And Kira's favourite colour was purple. So she put on a big purple t-shirt and pulled the purple bow out of her hair. They went to the bathroom and brushed their teeth, making sure they brushed for a whole minute on the top and a whole minute on the bottom. They pulled faces at each other in the bathroom mirror to keep themselves occupied. All kinds of monstrous faces, until soon enough the time was up. They spat their toothpaste into the sink and wiped away the bits that had dribbled down onto their chins. When they went back through to the bedroom, their mum had already been in to pull the curtains closed. A soft, silvery moonlight peeked in through the corners of the window, and they could hear the magical whisperings of the forest trees outside. Koko and Kira climbed into their beds. Koko let out another big yawn, and so did Kira. My, said Kira, I must be tired. Night-night, Koko. Night-night, Kira, Koko replied. And with that, they turned over and fell asleep. 1 minute passed, and another minute, and another one slipped by. Outside, a breeze stirred through the trees, and Kira, poor Kira, lay wide awake in her bed. She had woken up after only a few minutes of sleep, her stomach once again full of excitement about the following day. She turned over in her bed, first this way, then that way, trying her best to find a comfortable position that would send her straight back into the land of dreams. But try as she might, she could not. Eventually, Kira's twisting and turning roused Koko from his sleep. He turned over and looked at her across the room and said, "Oh dear, Kira, can't you sleep?" Kira let out a sigh. "Oh, I'm afraid I can't, Koko," she said. "I fell asleep for a few minutes there, but then I woke up full of excitement, and now I can't get myself back to sleep." "Well," Koko whispered, "the best thing to help you fall asleep is to concentrate on your breathing. Your breath carries the special magic of sleep on it. So if you pull it gently all the way down into your belly, it helps settle all your excitement and lets you drift off to sleep. Do you want to try it, Kira? Why don't we try some deep breathing together?" Kira said that sounded like a good idea indeed. So Koko told her to take a deep breath all the way down into the warm bottom of her tummy, and then he told her to let the breath out slowly. They breathed in, and they breathed out. You have to feel the breath go all the way down to the tips of your fingers and the tips of your toes, Kira, Koko told her. Kira did as Koko said. She took a deep breath in and felt it tingle all the way down to the tips of her fingers and the tips of her toes. Then she let it slowly out. She felt her body relax as though it were carried on a big, fluffy cushion. "Has that helped?" Koko whispered. "I definitely feel more relaxed," Kira told him. "But I haven't been able to fall asleep. What do you think I should do?" "Well, we'll have to try something different," Koko said. "Do you want to know what I do whenever I can't sleep?" "Yes, please," replied Kira. "I count sheep," he said. "Count sheep?" asked Kira. "What does that mean?" "It's a method for falling back asleep," Koko explained. "You close your eyes, and in your head you imagine sheep grazing in a beautiful grassy field. In the middle of the field is a fence, a low white fence. And one by one, the sheep run along and hop over the fence, one after another, an endless stream of sheep, and you count them as you go. The theory is that counting sheep is so monotonous that you'll fall back asleep again without even knowing it. Would you like to give it a try?" Kira said that it was certainly worth a go. "Close your eyes then," said Koko, "and do what I just said. Count the sheep." Kira closed her eyes, and just like her big brother had told her to, she pictured a beautiful green meadow with lots of sheep grazing on it. The sheep were so big and fluffy that they looked like big puffs of cloud sitting on the grass, munching away. Then she pictured a white fence in the field, and then one by one, she nudged the sheep in her imagination to start jumping the fence. First one, then two, then 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. She counted 20 sheep, and then 30 sheep. She counted 50 sheep, and then 100 sheep. By the time she got to 217 sheep, Kira decided that as fun as it was, this counting sheep method was not successfully sending her off to sleep. "Koko," she whispered, "I counted 217 sheep. The field is pretty busy with sheep now, but I still can't fall asleep." "Okay," Koko replied. "Let's try something else then." He slipped out of his bed and turned on their nightlight, which was in the shape of a little pig. Then he perched on the side of Kira's bed. "Do you think a cup of hot chocolate might help you fall back to sleep?" he asked. Kira nodded. "I think it might." "Okay then," said Koko. "I'll go and make you one now. I won't be long." "Thank you, Koko," Kira said. Koko went out of their bedroom and climbed the ladder down into the lower section of their cozy little log cabin. Everyone else had gone to bed now, and the kitchen was only lit up by watery moonlight coming in through the windows. He poured some milk into a saucepan and very carefully placed the saucepan in the hot oven so that the milk could warm. When it was ready, he put on oven mitts and took the saucepan out. He poured the warm milk out into Kira's favourite mug, a purple one, of course. And then he added a few scoops of the most delicious hot chocolate powder ever, which came from Papa Praline's chocolate factory, just on the other side of Sleepy Forest. He stirred the chocolate powder into the warm milk until all the clumpy bits had dissolved and the milk had turned a lovely, thick brown colour. Koko took a deep breath in through his nose. That smelled delicious, if he did say so himself. Careful not to let any of the drink slosh and spill over the sides, Koko picked up the mug of hot chocolate and climbed back up the ladder. He went back into his bedroom and perched on the edge of Kira's bed again. "Here you go, Kira," he whispered softly. "Here's your hot chocolate." Kira sat up in her bed and took the purple mug from her brother. She gave the hot chocolate a sip. That's delicious, Koko," she said. "Thank you very much. It's so warm and soothing in my tummy. I'm sure this will help send me back off to sleep." She took another sip of the hot chocolate. Then she said, "Hey, Koko, do you think you could sing a nighttime lullaby on your ukulele? I think that would help me to get to sleep too." "Of course I can," Koko said, because there was very little he loved doing so much as playing his ukulele. He picked it up from the side and gave it a little strum, just to check that it was in tune. He cast about the room searching for inspiration on what lullaby to sing for Kira. His eyes drifted over their beds, across the walls, and out of the window, where he saw that the sky was now spangled with lots of little stars. That gave him just the idea. Koko strummed his ukulele and began to sing one of his favorite lullabies ever. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. As Koko ended his lullaby, he looked at his sister and saw that her eyes were closed. Her duvet was rising and falling steadily from her breath, and a look of peaceful contentment had settled over her face. It seemed that she had fallen into a deep slumber. So Koko carried on strumming his ukulele gently, letting the spangly chords echo around their little cabin room like waves lapping on the shore, bearing Kira ever deeper into sleep. When he was sure that his sister had drifted completely off, Koko stopped his strumming. He rested his ukulele on his knee. He looked at Kira fondly. Kira opened one eye. "Oh dear, Kira," Koko sighed. "You're still not asleep?" Kira shook her head. "I loved your ukulele playing," she told him. "It was so peaceful. It made me feel all warm inside, and I felt like I was drifting away, up into the sky. And for a while, I thought I was floating up there with all the twinkly stars. But, well, I still can't sleep. I'm still too excited." Koko put his ukulele back down on the side and stroked his chin thoughtfully. He murmured. "We'll have to think of something even better then." Koko scratched his head for more ideas of what could help send his little sister off to sleep. He let his eyes ramble across the room, lit up as it was with the pink glow of the pig nightlight. His eyes drifted over the wall, over the sprigs of bamboo that grew in the corner of the cabin, and at last alighted upon the bookshelf. Koko had an idea. "Hey, Kira," he said, "how about I read you a bedtime story? Hopefully that will take your mind off your excitement and transport you to a whole other magical world. Then, hopefully, you'll be able to fall asleep." From beneath her duvet, Kira smiled and nodded. "That sounds like an excellent idea, Koko," she said. "Could you read me a story, pretty please?" So Koko got up from the edge of Kira's bed and walked over to the bookshelf. Their dad had built the shelf and fixed it upon the wall years ago, and it contained many wonderful volumes of books. There were adventure books and mystery books. There were fantasy books and books for a rainy day. But there there was one particular volume that Koko knew he needed. Right at the end of the shelf stood a big, dusty book, bound in leather, with its well-used ancient pages yellowed and crisp. On the spine, in gold lettering, were written the words, Bedtime Stories. Koko pulled the book off the shelf and carried it back across the room. He sat on the edge of Kira's bed once more and lay the book on his lap. It felt heavy. He flipped the book over and it fell open on a story. "Oh, Kira," Koko whispered. "This one looks like the perfect story. It isn't one we've heard before. It's called The Sleepy Star." "The Sleepy Star," Kira repeated. "That does sound like a good story." She nestled down further into her duvet and nuzzled her head into the softness of her pillow. "Let's read that one." And so Koko began to read the words of the story, The Sleepy Star. It went like this. Once upon a time there was a star who, whenever nighttime fell, got very sleepy indeed. Now, this doesn't sound like such a bad thing to us creatures who live on the earth, who fall asleep when darkness sets in. But it was something of a problem for the star. That's because since the beginning of history, it's the star's job to be awake at night and twinkling. And then when daylight comes, that's when the stars get to close their eyes and rest. But this little star, she got tired at night. And so, when all the other stars were out twinkling and shining, she'd yawn and drift off, and her eyes would close, and then her light would go out. When this happened, the other stars would wake her up. "Come on," they would say. "You have to stay awake. It's night time, and we need your twinkling." And then the little star would peel open her eyes and concentrate on being awake. And that would work for a little while. But sooner or later, and it was always sooner, she would drift off back to sleep, and her light would go out. The other stars did everything they could to try to solve the problem. They took turns at prodding the little star to try to keep her awake. But that just resulted in the little star becoming tired and grouchy. No one likes to be prodded like that. They even tried telling her stories all night to keep her entertained. But the stories didn't work. The sleepy little star would just fall asleep right in the middle of them. Finally, they investigated whether she was getting enough sleep during the daytime so that she had enough energy to twinkle at night. And what they discovered was that she was often awake during the daytime when she ought to be asleep. They scratched their starry heads about this. What a topsy-turvy little star that sleepy star was. They just could not think of what to do about it. One night, while they were trying to keep the sleepy star awake, the silver moon sailed past them. The moon was renowned far and wide for being one of the wisest beings to voyage across the skies. And so, the stars told the moon about the sleepy little star's predicament. They explained that she slept at night and stayed awake in the day, which was entirely the wrong way around for a star. Could the wise moon think of any solution for their dilemma? The moon stroked his silvery chin while he contemplated the problem. It was a tricky one indeed. But the stories of the moon's wisdom were not unfounded, and soon enough he came up with a solution. "This sleepy star," he said, "clearly doesn't like to twinkle at night and sleep during the day. So instead of changing him, why don't we all just accept him for who he is? He's a day twinkler, not a night twinkler. So perhaps you should let him do just that." All the stars scratched their heads once again. They'd never considered just letting the sleepy star be the way the sleepy star was. That was a rather inspired idea from the moon, they agreed. Smiles began to spread across the faces of all the stars, including the sleepy star herself, who rather liked the idea of being allowed to twinkle at the time she preferred to twinkle. "That's a wonderful solution," the stars told the moon. "But there is just one problem." "And what might that problem be?" the moon asked the stars. "Well," piped up one star, "stars twinkle at night. That's what the very name star means. So if this sleepy star here isn't twinkling at night, should we still call her a star?" The moon agreed that this was a very good point indeed. "Perhaps, in that case," he suggested, "they ought to give the sleepy star a new name." "Good idea," the stars agreed, but then they frowned. "What name should we give her then?" The moon smiled at them. "Best to ask her, don't you think?" he said. And so all the other stars turned to the sleepy star, and they asked her what she would like her new name to be. The sleepy star thought about this question for a little while. Then she came up with an answer. "I think I would like to be called the sun." The stars all nodded in agreement. Sun. That was a perfect name. And so ever since then, the sun has not shone at night, but has kept the daytime sky lit bright with all of her brilliant twinkling. When Koko had finished telling the story, he closed the book. "Wasn't that a good story, Kira?" he whispered. "Kira? Kira?" Koko peered at his little sister. Kira, it seemed, had fallen asleep. What a miracle! Telling the bedtime story had worked its magic then. Koko watched her for a few moments, watched the rise and fall of her breathing, and the twitching of her little panda nose as she drifted off into her dream world. She was probably dreaming of swinging from trees, zooming down zip lines through the sleepy forest canopy. He waited a minute or two to see if she would wake up again, but she didn't. And so, very quietly indeed, so as not to disturb her, Koko slipped off the edge of her bed. He returned the book of bedtime stories to the shelf where it belonged and slid under his own bed covers. It was warm in there, so soft and cozy, just perfect for falling asleep. Koko let out a big yawn. He was very tired indeed now. All that work trying to help Kira fall asleep had really taken it out of him. He leant over and turned off the pig nightlight, and the room sank into darkness. Now there was just the silvery light of the moon slipping through the gaps in the curtains. Now there was just the tranquil noise of the crickets outside and the wind whispering through the trees and the steady grumbles of the trees. The world was entirely at peace. Koko closed his eyes. He pictured a green meadow in the evening, full of fluffy clouds of sheep. In the middle of the field there was a little fence. But before Koko could even count a single sheep jumping over it, he had fallen into a deep and profoundly peaceful sleep. Now we're floating into a deep and peaceful sleep. Feel how your muscles are relaxing. Your arms are heavy and your legs are too, as they loosen and release any tension remaining from the day. Feel how you let your body fall into the cozy warmth of your bed. Close your eyes. Let your eyelids be heavy. Breathe deeply. Breathe in and out. Breathe in and out as you continue to breathe deeply, and as you keep feeling how your body becomes soft and heavy with sleep. Let your mind drift away. That is the wonderful secret about sleep. While your body rests, lying heavily in your bed, your mind is set free, like a bird taking flight from a branch and flying up and up and up into the air. Feel how your mind loosens now, like a balloon that has been untied from a fence, and floats up and up and up like a bird. Up and up and up it floats towards the sky until it reaches up into the clouds. Imagine that you have risen up high above the world and your head has poked up through the clouds. Then spread out all around you in the silvery moonlight, white fluffy clouds that look like cotton wool or marshmallows. They look so soft and squishy. You can lie back on them and roll around in them. Try it now. Lie back in the soft cradle of the clouds. Feel how they swirl and wrap around your body, holding you gently in the world of sleep. Clouds come in all shapes and sizes. Some are big and fluffy, Some are slender wisps. Some look like puffy mushrooms, and others look like paintbrush strokes that have been left on the dark sky. Let your body relax. Let your mind relax too. Let your mind float off into sleep. You are peaceful. You are safe. You are being held in the cozy warmth of sleep. With your eyes closed, let your mind drift up, up, up and away. In the world of dreams, you can go anywhere you like. You can float on blue oceans with ripples and tufts of waves. Or you can visit castles built in the sky with spiraling turrets and drawbridges over sparkling moats. Or you can wander into the peaceful woods where the birds are twittering and the trees are dense with dark green leaves. Breathe in and out. Breathe in and out again as you fall more deeply into your cozy sleep. And with your eyes still closed, take a look around with your mind at where your dreams have taken you. When I fall asleep, I dream that I've gone to a world high up in the clouds. Sometimes the clouds are dappled silver from the moonlight. Sometimes they're soft pink and gold, reflecting the light of the twinkling stars. What form do your dreams take? Where does your mind go when you fall asleep? Maybe in your dreams there are flocks of white fluffy sheep huddling together on the green fields. Look at the mother ewe yawn widely before she tucks her little lambs beneath her woolly fleece. Or maybe you dream of a friendly dragon, curled up with his tail wrapped around him, a little trail of clouds puffing out of his nostrils. Look, the cloud dragon is smiling at us and waving. What a friendly dragon he is. Or maybe you dream of cute puppies lying on their backs, their tongues lolling out of their mouths, their eyes closing because they've had such a long day. They look tired, and there's their papa dog, fluffy and white, padding softly over to wish the puppies good night. Up here on the sea of clouds, you can be free. Feel how light you are, weightless, floating, drifting through sleep. Feel everything heavy from the day lift off you and drift away, taken away by currents until they disappear over the bank of clouds. Any worries you have been having, watch them float away. Anything that has been weighing on your mind during the daytime, now you can let them go and watch them drift away. Your worries are not you. You are not your worries. You can let them go. Watch them float away. Now you are light as air. You are as gentle as starlight. You are as soft as the clouds. Up in the sleepy sky, everything is weightless and peaceful. The clouds stretch out like a sea of tranquility. Close your eyes and feel the clouds wrap around you. Feel them bearing your body gently into the land of sleep. Feel your eyes close. Feel them rest heavily as your body relaxes into sleep. Feel your mind lighten. Feel it loosen and drift away, light as a feather, soft as the clouds. Breathe in and out. Breathe in and out. The world of clouds is waiting for you. Let yourself fall into the clouds' soft, warm hug. They are here to protect you. They are here to cushion you. They are here to hold you as you enjoy your deep and peaceful sleep. Sleep well, little one. Sleep well in the land of clouds. Feel how light you are. Feel how weightless, floating, drifting through sleep, light as air, gentle as starlight, soft as clouds. Good night, little one. Sleep